This is Keys to the Shop, episode 248, the 5 elements of resourcing your team. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I hope you had a great Halloween weekend. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen to the bonus episode on Saturday, that was a little bit of an extra episode called The Grossest Stories from Behind the Bar, submitted stories from listeners to Keys to the Shop. So that was pretty fun to do. Also, don't forget, we had a great Founder Friday episode with Ritesh Doshi of Spring Valley Coffee in Kenya. That's episode 247. So definitely check that out if you have not. And also, if you haven't subscribed to the show, I would encourage you to subscribe. Please hit subscribe wherever you receive your podcasts. You'll always be up to date with these new episodes. And we're trying to get up to 200 reviews on iTunes. If you would do us a favor, if you love this show, if you've really been helped by the content, the guests, and all that we do here at Keys to the Shop, would you leave us a 5-star review over at iTunes? It could be a rating or review, just something real quick. It really helps the show gain visibility. And thank you so much to everybody who continues to leave ratings and reviews for the show. I really appreciate it. So on top of offering you this resource of a podcast, Keys to the Shop also offers consulting for you and your business. Whether you're just starting your first shop and want to start on the right foot, or you already have a business and you need some advice, you need some consulting for scaling your operation or leveling up your operations. There are so many different ways that Keys to the Shop can help, and I would love to talk with you about it. If you're interested in working with Keys to the Shop Consulting to help your operation really thrive, then simply email me, chris@keystotheshop.com. That's CHRIS @keystotheshop.com. We can just hop on a phone call and figure out how I might be able to help you. Again, the email for Keys to the Shop Consulting, chris@keystotheshop.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Prima Coffee is one of the world's best specialty coffee equipment suppliers. If you're in the market for commercial equipment, whether it's brewers, espresso machines, grinders, or even restaurant equipment like under-counter refrigeration, Prima Coffee has what you need. They have such an amazing selection because they scour the globe. They curate from around the world the best equipment that they can find, and then they fit it perfectly with what you need for your situation. That's why I love working with them, because they're all about helping equip you for success. You can go to the website prima-coffee.com/keys. You'll see the amazing selection that I just mentioned, but you'll also see under the Learn tab that there is a ton of resources to help get you familiar with the equipment and also information about brewing coffee, pouring latte art. So that's just another bonus that Prima offers, because they really do care about you thriving in your coffee business. So if you're looking for great commercial coffee equipment, then I'd say that you definitely need to check out Prima Coffee. Go visit them over at prima-coffee.com/keys. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Pacific Barista Series. This is an amazing lineup of plant-based performance beverages: the oat, soy, almond, coconut, rice, hemp. It is truly something that delivers again and again on the bar for your customers, and offering your customers the best plant-based products is what we all should want to do, right? And the amount of work that goes into the Pacific Barista Series is why it's globally the number one choice for specialty coffee shops. It is made for baristas and with the feedback of some of the world's best baristas. So when you use it, you know it's going to perform on bar. It's going to stand up to the heat from steaming, produce an amazing texture, just amazing for latte art, and keep the balance of the beverage focused on coffee. All of these things make it a win, in my book, for your customers, and I think you need to get this in your store and try it out for yourself. Go to their website, pacificfoodservice.com. If you're looking for the best in plant-based beverages, then you absolutely could not ask for better than the Pacific Barista Series. Okay, everybody, so today we're going to be talking about the 5 elements of resourcing your employees, resourcing your team. Something I talk about on the show a lot is, we talk about resources, that if you don't give your team the tools they need to grow, to do their job, you're going to lose them. We talked about this on the top 10 ways to lose employees episode, which was episode 244. top 10 ways to lose employees. One of them was don't give them the tools they need to do their job. Now, I realize that the idea of just giving them the tools to do their job is a little bit vague because in that word tools, there is a lot of different ways that you can interpret that. And so I wanted to break it down for you a little bit further and get a little bit more granular and practical so that you know exactly what an ideal situation would look like for resourcing your team. And it's really important that as a manager, as a leader or owner, the work you do, it's all about resourcing, setting things up in such a way that people will succeed. And that doesn't happen by accident. That's something that we do on purpose, and we contemplate ways to do it better and better. And so today's episode, we're going to go over 5 elements that go into resourcing your staff. And the first of these is going to be planning. So all good resourcing starts with planning. When you want to set your team up for success, they want to know that you have a plan, that you've thought through exactly what needs to happen, and you're going to tell them what that plan is. So they're counting on the leader to have already thought about what's happening once they hear about a new beverage on the menu. Everything that you hold your team accountable for is going to need to have an element of planning in it on your end. And all of these areas that we're talking about today are going to apply to whatever it is you hold them accountable for. Making a cappuccino, closing out the register at night, taking the trash out, whatever, doing the dishes, planning. You have to have already thought about what you want them to do before you ask them to do it. Now, of course, you can get bogged down in the planning. Instead of not doing it, you do it too much. In other words, you never pull the trigger. You have a plan. You want to make it perfect. We have to make it perfect before we launch it. And meanwhile, everyone's like, can you just launch it so that we can have something? Can we have an SOP for the dishes? Oh, it's the SOP for the dishes is not perfect, but soon. No, let's just put it in place. Okay. Make it, do some checks, make a version 2 or something, like review it, but put it in place. Planning doesn't need to be the pursuit of perfection. Planning needs to be done, and it needs to be done for the benefit of the people. And just like when a drink takes too long to make on bar, at a certain point, the customer just doesn't care about the quality of the drink. The barista who's fussing with a shot of espresso thinking, oh, that was 1 second over. Oh, that was 1 second under, and they keep throwing shots out. Meanwhile, the customer is thinking, I'm about 1 second away from leaving. This is what can happen if we take planning and use it as a tool inadvertently to procrastinate on making progress. So planning needs to happen. It needs to happen with balance, of course, but it starts with thinking through what you want your people to do, and from there, adding these different elements. So first, we start with planning. Next, we're going to talk about time. As you're planning this process, as you're thinking it out, you need to make sure that you are not going to give them a task that they physically cannot do within the constraints of the time allotted to do it. So if you have the expectation of your staff that they have to make all of the beverages within 1 minute, like from order to pickup, but the bar is not really set up very efficiently, then you're going to be setting them up for failure. The time that you give people needs to be realistic. So if it's 30 minutes to close the store, but you know for a fact that your shop is super busy right up until close, it might mean that you need to either A, have an extra person, B, you need to adjust your expectation and give them more time to close the store. This is part of resourcing, giving them the time to do the job that's needed. Most of the reason why the first people to sort of rebel, if you will, against the way that things should be done are closers, is because they tend to be the ones where a lot of work is dumped. We would just say, well, the closers can do it. The closers can do it. Or I'll just put this on the closing checklist to make sure everything is nice for the openers tomorrow morning. Time is really the issue here. And not having thought through, is this realistic? Maybe you need to do it yourself. Maybe you need to go in and close the cafe within the time frames that you've given your closers. And once you know the realistic dimensions of time that your bar is capable of, then you can move on to our next element of resourcing your team, which is tools. Tools in this case, rather than just meaning stuff. Is specifically meaning things that you use with your hands to create the desired outcome. That means a portafilter, knockbox, sponges, tamper, broom, mop, towels. All of those things have to have a purpose that has been thought through, ready and available for your staff to use them so that they can achieve what you want them to achieve and what they want to achieve too. Everyone wants to do a good job. They want the tools necessary to actually do the work that you want them to do. So if they're working without a tool they need, or they're working with broken tools and it's not as efficient, if you just paid attention to giving them the right things to do their job, you'd be surprised at how much faster they can go on the bar without worrying about destroying the knockbox because it's hanging on by a thread. There's a lot more confidence that somebody has when they know the tool that they need for the job is right there. Just imagine in the office, and maybe you don't have to imagine, there's no pens. There's never any pens. How can there be no pens? I just bought pens. Now instead of using a pen, I'm looking for pens. So now we're wasting time. This is the barista's dilemma when they can't find something because either it wasn't ordered or they actually don't have it, or it was misplaced. This is the struggle. So in the planning process, you should have already thought about all the tools that people are going to need to do this job and the amount of them that they're going to need. So if the towels are constantly running out, then it's time to order more towels and increase the par. But maybe they're running out because people are just misusing them. How do you know? You have to investigate and figure out the why behind it. And if it truly is that we just go through a lot of towels, then you need to order more. But resourcing your team with physical tools to accomplish the work is so, so critical. Now, another element of resourcing here is information. If you don't have the information that you need about a special, a sale, a hours change, or just ingredients in a menu, questions that customers have often are met with a blank stare from the barista because they were never told. And they end up having to ask their coworker, and their coworker doesn't know. So now they look silly to the customer and they feel silly because they didn't have the information they needed to answer the question, or they have no idea that we were doing a sale that day because nobody put it in the team text thread. It wasn't really planned out that well. It was like a shoot from the hip thing from management, just all of a sudden. If management had been doing their job, then they would have pursued every person who was going to be expected to represent that sale to a customer. One can only assume that the managers just don't want this to go well, that the owners just don't care. And I would say one would only assume because that's what baristas assume, that the managers don't care. And the lack of information to do the job well, that is interpreted most of the time as, well, guess we're going to wing it. I guess they don't really care about this. And the thing is that anybody in authority in the coffee shop is automatically guilty until proven innocent. So the work that you do behind the scenes is not going to be appreciated unless it's actualized on the bar. And that might be unfair, but it's just the nature of the power differential that there is in the coffee shop in between, those who have authority and those who don't. Again, your role in authority is basically to resource this thing, and not just the thing, people, to resource people, give them the things they need to do the job. And part of that is the information. So moral of the story here is people need to know their knowledge of product, their knowledge of specials, their knowledge of ingredients, anything that you would have said, gosh, I wish they would have answered this question this way, or I wish they would have made that drink this way. Well, did you give them the information they needed? And that brings us to our last element here of resourcing your team, and that is training. So when you've gone through all of these, you've planned this out, you've thought through all of the elements and made sure that they had time to do the job. They had the tools necessary to do it. They had all the information that they need. Now it's a matter of training, because you can't just throw all this information in a manual, drop it off like a stork, and then expect them to just gobble it up and read it. Oh my gosh, there's a manual? Then guess what I'm doing the rest of my night? I'm going to read this manual, said no barista ever. Maybe one barista. But I think that we have this unrealistic idea that because we've put so much work into crafting this veritable Bible of knowledge of our business, that because of our connection to it, other people will feel a connection to it. And for most people, it's just coming in out of left field, okay? They don't have the vested interest in this, especially if you're the owner. This is just a collection of pages, which Stan Slapp has said. He is the author of the book Under the Hood. He's on an episode called What You Must Know About Employee Culture. Baristas interpret what is safe and what is dangerous. And new information, new initiatives, new policies, etc., those things are inherently dangerous until they are not, until they're proven safe. So all of the passion that you put into this new policy, all of the good intentions that you put into this new lineup of drinks, everything is met with suspicion, not because people are bad workers, but because the onus to prove that this is something we can do and that it is good to do is on you. And it is not good enough just to say, well, read the manual and do this. You need to actually train your people. You need to say, okay, we're going to mop the floor a different way. Here is how we're going to mop the floor. Let's practice mopping the floor. How does that feel? Okay, great. That's how we're mopping the floor from now on. And then check in with people afterwards that they are mopping the floor that way. Stretch that example out to everything. Cappuccinos, mochas, the different way that we're going to do our iced matcha, the different way we're going to do sandwich prep in the morning before the lunch rush. There are innumerable opportunities for us to train people, but sometimes we just default to it's in the manual. And we can't do that. We need to be hands-on managers. I say it over and over again. We need to be hands-on managers, hands-on leaders. That means not only making sure that everybody's on the same page, but that everybody understands what's on that page and they're actually practicing and doing what's on that page. So resourcing your team means investing into training for their development, and eventually they're going to see that what's in the manual actually works. This new way of doing workflow actually is better. Why is it better? Why is it so much better? Well, it's really because when we developed this, we went through these 5 elements of resourcing. We planned it out. We thought through what the problem was. We made sure that the time element was in line. We made sure that the tools were there to do the job. We made sure that you had the information in the form of documents and in communications, and we're training you to do it. And that's why it works so well, because it was done with great intention. And this is the crux of the whole thing. As we seek to be better at resourcing our teams and giving them what they need to succeed, we need to be intentional. And we can't just slip into autopilot. We're not setting up a passive income stream here through a coffee shop. This is hands-on stuff. And if we skip any of these things, if we don't plan, if we don't give people time, if we don't give them the information or the tools they need to do their job, and we don't train them, if any of those aren't there, then you're going to feel it on the bar. Whether you identify it as one of these things or not, a majority of the time, one of these things is out of whack. And it's our job to get our own house in order before we start trying to get other people in order. So ask ourselves the question, are we planning? Are we giving time, tools, information, and training? And if we are, and if we've done these things well, now we can go from there, set things in order, and we'll be doing so for the benefit of the entire company and the people who make it run. So I hope that breaking this down a little bit more was helpful for you. If you have any questions or comments, feedback about this episode, please do contact me via email over at chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting, that's also the email to use, chris@keystotheshop.com. And that is the end of our episode today. Now, stay tuned because there is going to be a wonderful episode with Christopher Ferran and Shane Hindy of Phoenix Coffee in Cleveland next week, all about how they've transitioned to a cooperative ownership model. Very fascinating conversation. You're not going to want to miss that one. And again, a reminder that there are some related episode links in the show notes of this episode that you'll want to check out for sure. So be sure to visit the show notes in your podcast player for those links. And that is it for the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I really appreciate you all so much. And I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.